I'm fresh out of the podcast show 2025, and I have so many updates for you. What is coming in 2025? Is video really the only way to move forward? What you should consider if you're trying to grow organically. Hi, I'm Xavier. I'm the founder of The Podcast Space. I'm an award-winning podcast marketer, and I teach you better ways to leverage your podcast to grow, get visibility, and increase listener engagement. Let's dive into this week's episode of The Podcast Space. All right, my friends, I have so much to share with you. I'm finally having my voice back because honestly, that was rough. The show was so crowded. And I think that they said that there were around 6,000 people that attended the event, plus almost 4,000 about the events that happened across town. So definitely a lot of people attended. So also if you're watching the video and you're like, where the heck are you? I'm in Portugal at my sister's house. I wanted to take the challenge to do podcasting slightly different. I wanted to give you the insights, not wait for the time that I'm back in Arkansas in about 2 weeks. So definitely wanted to do a little more rough and play around. That was something that I did talk about on the panel that I spoke at the podcast show this year. The topic was all about like how to leverage your voice, how to stay authentic, and keep that longevity going in the industry. And one of the things that I mentioned was talk about like the things that it may not always be perfect, be okay with some episodes that are going to be like your best ones. Others that are like, there were some good takeaways for this, but I definitely didn't put or wasn't able to put as much effort as I could in others just to get it done, just to relay the messages. So this one is definitely that. I am recording with a different setup than usual, just having fun on that. There was so many things that happened because I was speaking at a panel. I ended up not being able to make as many sessions as I wanted because just like a lot of talking to people just happened nonstop. So I did attend the YouTube session on day 2. And a couple of things that I want to let you know. In comparison with the US, the podcast show in London, it's only in its like, I think 3rd or 4th edition. Still a very young kind of like conference. They call it festival. It definitely feels like a different vibe. There's so many people that come from all over the world, from different continents. So the podcast show is definitely becoming the hub, the place to be for learning podcasting and for networking. I met a lot of friends who are peers, and so many of them, they did not leave the bar at all. They stayed there networking, having those meetings, booking those meetings. And it was honestly really interesting. Again, the first day I did not make a single session because of that. So if you're looking for connections with the industry, you can do that. If you're looking to learn, same thing. And so a lot of the sessions are for beginner level and mid-level, and then celebrity, like really big shows and case studies of those really big shows. I find that there's something for everybody there. Last year, which was, I think, the second year, there was a big BBC presence. This year, it was companies from a lot of like either America or global companies. So let's start with video. I did attend the session, and at YouTube's session, they were talking about the future and like what they're looking for. They're definitely doubling down on the medium of podcasting. So a lot of interest in podcasting becoming more of a YouTube product. So it's not just streaming. It's not just vlogs. It's not just like video first. A lot of interest in keeping the podcast audiences on YouTube. In fact, they did say that the living room setting was the fastest growing surface on YouTube, which was really interesting. Then they did say as well that when video is present, UK listeners, around 70% of UK listeners said that they prefer video to remain entertained. But it was really interesting that at another session, they were releasing UK listener data, and they were saying that when there's video, 41% of people say that they still prefer audio. Now, if there's a reason for portability, that makes sense. Data is a big thing, right? Like not everyone has unlimited data, or if you're somewhere like in the tube or going through areas that don't have that much connection, you need to download an audio format, and it's like easier than having to stream a whole video podcast. So, well, that being said, when I was traveling around London, I did see a lot of people consuming podcasts on Tube, like actual video ones. So I think it just kind of like varies. But it's always interesting, depending on the sessions that you attend, there will be like conflicting information at times, and you're like, which one is it really, guys? All right, so quickly going through YouTube, auto dubbing is coming as like a mainstream thing. So hopefully very soon we're going to be able to get our podcast content translated into different languages automatically, which for me as a Portuguese native, I'm looking forward to that because I want my podcast to be available in Portuguese but I never have the capacity to have 2 shows in 2 different languages and promote both. So I'm excited for that. They'll also mention that they want to leverage shorts as more of a preview of the episode. So if you upload shorts, know that they're going to be reusing a lot more of that content. So continue doing it. I would say they're really wanting to push podcasting as a product. And so if you're not having your audio only show on YouTube, at least connect your RSS feed to it. Stop procrastinating. Just get it onto an audio only experience at the very least, because they will continue sharing a lot more and getting more audiences connected. On that same note, I did hear a lot of concern from a lot of indie creators and also podcast hosting platforms saying, hey, we don't want YouTube to be the place where people host their podcasts. Because again, 20 years ago, right, Apple pushed for the RSS, which is an open format. So you pick where you host, you have control over it. And so a lot of people are concerned that if you start hosting a podcast on YouTube, you're going to have more limited control over your podcast. And I agree with that. So in terms of podcasting hosting platforms, I did talk to Captivate, which is the platform that I host my podcast at. And they did say that there's a lot of exciting things coming in the dashboard and the analytics dashboard. I do know what it is, but because they don't have a date to release these features, they asked me not to reveal. I'm sorry. I never gatekeep, but again, a lot of better use of the dashboard. I can't say more, but just know that if you're experiencing some issues, some delays, they are aware of that, because I did relate that. So many of you mentioned it. So I definitely talked to them about that. AI was a big thing. I'm just going to kind of recap this quickly. AI was something that a lot of places were being discussed. There were multiple panels about it. Some were like, okay, what is our role in podcasting with AI? The consensus was about use AI as a tool to do the things that you don't want to do, the boring things, the tedious things, and use your brain, use your talents for the creative stuff, for the strategic stuff. So for instance, use AI to help you come up with a better title, but don't just rely on AI's title. Make sure that it makes sense. Make sure that it is aligned with your audience, with your goals, or use AI to help you draft more information about your guest, but draft your questions yourself. Don't rely on AI for that. Talking about that panel, Riverside announced that they're going to be providing YouTube thumbnails very soon. So I'm very excited about that, because people do look at your title and your thumbnail in order to make a decision of clicking or not. So that's one of the things that to me personally always takes time. What are some good screenshots that I can use? Headliner shared a feature I did not know about. So they have a TLDL. So instead of too long didn't read, is too long didn't listen. So it's kind of a recap of your show. I thought that was really cool. And then recheck your workflow every 6 months, because AI is moving so fast that you could be able to improve your skill set, improve your processes, and spend less time doing on the things that don't matter as much. One big thing for podcast companies is that a lot of organizations and leaders are moving away from the download and wanting to start measuring unique listeners or streams as a more, let's say, accurate way to measure podcast growth instead of the download. A lot of people are saying that's not accurate. Spotify changing its metrics also helped that conversation move forward. So expect in 2025 a lot of people starting to move toward those metrics when you want podcast sponsorships or talking about growth. So keep that in mind. Also, one thing that I thought was really interesting, I talked to a friend of mine. He sold 2 shows in the past 5 years. And so it was such a great reminder that you can sell a show, be able to still host the show, and make money with it. And there's a lot of potential for that. I can't reveal, because I forgot to ask him if I could talk about it for this show. So I don't want to reveal data, but I'm just going to say that this person sold their first show for 5 figures, and it was a low 5 figures. But then the second show sold it for under $500,000. It was 6 figures. So it's possible. And this person does not have a big company behind them. So just keep that in mind. One thing that was talked about was what are some alternative ways to grow your podcast, and podcast swaps, skill swaps, submitting your podcast to newsletters. Those were really big, still talked about things. And one thing that is going to sound very self-serving, but a lot of people are starting to see how social media is not sustainable to promote their podcast, or at least exclusively. So I did talk to a lot of creators who were saying, I am starting to grow my email list now. I don't know where to start, or I want to start diversifying my marketing away from social media because there's too many algorithms. The reach is not enough. And to you, if you're thinking about this, I say, well, my friend, do go to the link below because I created the 5 easy to follow along and easy to start formats for your newsletter. I've tested this with clients. I've tested this in my newsletter. I've been writing newsletters since 2020. And trust me, all the imposter syndrome I had, all the doubts I had. And so I came up with these 5 formats that you can just check for guidance on how to do it. You just basically copy and paste, realize like what do we need to include so you can start sending newsletters to grow your audience, to grow your monetization, and to increase listener engagement. Oh, and one last thing that I want to mention regarding growth on YouTube. One thing that I was told was that the YouTube team confirmed that basically if you have the episode word on your title, they are going to suppress your reach. Now, I forgot to ask if that was the case for the term EP or EP dot, if that was the same case. So if you have that on every episode, go back and take that word out, just have the number, just have hashtag and the number, and hopefully you see better reach on that side. So I do have just one more note, which is, if you're trying to grow your podcast in 2025, you're going to start seeing, and this is something that I took notes, there were so many sessions, and you see this online as well. A lot of people with like hot takes, a lot of people with like a lot of blank statements saying like, this is like the one way, like stop using social media to grow your podcast, like social media is dead. And it depends. If you don't like social media and if you don't enjoy it and that's something that you can't sustain, don't do it. If people saying like email marketing does nothing for me, well, just take it with a grain of salt, because there's a lot of people that want to create those hot takes moments, but in reality, like, they don't know your circumstances, they don't know what you enjoy, they don't know what you already are doing that is already working for you. So do not, please, for the love of the tech lords, do not go and follow advice blindly. So that is all that I have for you. I have to keep this episode short, but this episode included everything that you need to know to grow your podcast, to at least know what is coming and to keep that in mind. I've been Anna Xavier. Everything that I mentioned in this episode will be available at thepodcastspace.com/podcast. And in the show notes, I include the direct link for you to get all of the information that I mentioned in this show, including the guide that I have for you. So, without further ado, I invite you to create imperfect content that moves you forward, and I'll see you in the next episode.